The Daikin Comfort Pros at Legacy Heating and Air are saving you thousands on select Daikin heating systems. Upgrade to a Daikin high-efficiency heating system from Legacy today and spend the season warm and worry-free. Get thousands in rebates and federal tax incentives and enjoy flexible financing to suit your budget. Daikin systems deliver unbeatable comfort, cleaner, safer indoor air, and energy savings. Visit LegacyHeatingandAirInc.com to view exclusive offers and get qualified now.
A Cook family business.
Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, brought to you by Legacy Heating and Air. I'm Eric Hansen. The guy in the square next to me is Tyler James. There's actually a third of us, and that is Charleston Bowles, the most photogenic of us who actually isn't on the show for some reason. We have to figure that out. Anyways, Football Never Sleeps is the aspiring to be viral weekly Notre Dame football show that has continued into bowl prep season. And we've got lots of headlines to talk about tonight. The one thing that makes us a little bit different is that we answer your questions live. We work them into our conversations as we're going along. Marcus Freeman had a Notre Dame head coach. Marcus Freeman had a Zoom call with the media today in regards to the Sun Bowl, but we were able to get him on a couple other tangents. And we'll talk about all that and more. But first, Tyler James will take us home with all the things you need to know before we get started.
Yeah, first, like Eric mentioned, we will take questions during the show, so make sure you submit those. If you're new to the YouTube live process, make sure you've clicked through to the YouTube site or YouTube app to be able to access the comment section. There should be a chat box to the right-hand side if you're on a desktop version of some sort, and there should be a chat box below our talking heads if you're on a mobile device. We also have a 30-day free trial available for InsideNDSports.com. We hope you take advantage of that if you're not already a subscriber to the site. You can use promo code NDYT, which is exclusive to our YouTube audience. And if you use that when you sign up, you get free access to our premium analysis and recruiting coverage and special access to us on the Insider Lounge. That's the place where we have plenty of transfer portal talk right now. We put Mike Brown's name on the radar as Notre Dame's next potential wide receivers coach at some point last week, pretty soon after Chancey Stuckey was fired. So we hope you consider joining us over on the Insider Lounge with a subscription to Inside ND Sports. And there's also a link to sign up in the video description if you want to take advantage of that deal. All right, Eric, that's all for me. Back to you.
Okay. Before I launch into our agenda, I do want to mention, if you're stuck in ideas for Christmas gifts, you can get gift certificates to our site, and it doesn't have to be for a whole year. You can get 6 months, 3 months, 1 month. We'll work with you. Okay, now we're going to launch into Notre Dame. So let's take a look at Notre Dame, taking stock of Notre Dame after a whirlwind week, and boy was it. So the Irish are 9-3, ranked 16th in the final college football playoff, top 25. They're headed to El Paso, Texas for December 29th, Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl matchup with number 19 Oregon State, who's 8-4. And with a change at wide receiver coach, with 4 wide receivers and 7 other players already in the transfer portal on the day it opened for underclassmen, and facing a third-string quarterback for Oregon State, who was the Las Vegas Bowl MVP and 7-1 as an emergency starter last season. So we're going to start out with the news from the press conference today. It was only 15 minutes, and some of it was kind of non-news. And so I guess kind of start there, because Marcus Freeman was asked about opt-outs, and he said that he would like those players to have a chance to kind of do their individual announcements over the next week. So look for those announcements to come out. He said that he feels like he knows who's opting out and who's opting in. I asked him specifically about Sam Hartman, and I didn't get anywhere with that. So that was the biggest non-news of the day. The biggest news of the day really was him touching a little bit on wide receiver of Palooza. And that, what I mean by that is the 4 wide receivers who hit the transfer portal today, And then also the firing of Chancey Stuckey last week, the apparent lining up of a successor and Mike Brown from Wisconsin. The 3 recruits in the 2024 class all steadfastly sticking with their commitments. And then the news today that KK Smith and Deion Colsey will be available for the bowl game. They are practicing. KK Smith is a freshman who came in June, had offseason shoulder surgery, missed the entire regular season. He's had his first couple of practices. And Deion Colsey's a pretty good junior receiver, played in September after the 4th game, decided to undergo arthroscopic surgery instead of slogging through the season with a bad knee. He did not play the rest of the regular season, but he can play in the bowl and still redshirt this year. And I think I've caught us up with that part of it. So, Tyler, why don't you, since I believe you asked the question, why don't you catch us up on what Marcus Freeman had to say about that whole ball of wide receiver stuff I just threw at you?
Yeah, I don't even know where to start there. I guess I would start with not calling it a palooza. A palooza is a party, and I would say this is far from a party from Notre Dame's point of view. At least
that's
from where I'm sitting, Notre Dame is losing guys, and was losing guys at a rapid rate in the past week.
So it's an anti-palooza.
Maybe they're hoping they will have a palooza in the Sun Bowl to ease everyone's concerns with the guys who are still here, but. Certainly a surprising move for Chancey Stuckey to be fired shortly, especially given the context of Marcus Freeman the day before saying that he wanted everyone back. And he seems to be focused on the development of Notre Dame's wide receivers and maybe not being on the same page there with what Chancey Stuckey has done and what Notre Dame would like to do. I don't know. I mean, certainly the production of the wide receivers as a whole makes, I think it allows you to have a fair criticism of Chancey Stuckey there. But I think if you wanted to say, well, wait a minute, Chancey Stuckey, who are his best receivers this season? Chris Tyree, who played one season at receiver under Chancey Stuckey. Rico Flores Jr., who played one season as a receiver as a freshman under Chancey Stuckey. Jaden Greathouse, Jordan Faison, a freshman. So guys that had only played receiver for Chancey Stuckey were producing in Notre Dame's offense. Now, obviously, the problem was there were other guys in that group that weren't producing, and maybe there was a lack of development there, there was a lack of communication there that was not allowing all those guys to develop, and Marcus Freeman has made this decision to look elsewhere, and elsewhere we believe is Mike Brown, the Wisconsin wide receivers coach, who we reported yesterday is expected to replace Chancey Stuckey with a timeline to be determined. I'm not exactly sure when he would exactly be hired or necessarily announced as well.
Yeah, the announcement is always way after the hiring because of the extensive vetting process Notre Dame has had in place ever since the George O'Leary debacle, when he had fudged his resume and then was fired basically 4 days after he was hired and announced and introduced to the fans. And they had T-shirts made up that said, "By George, it's O'Leary." So it really went the opposite direction. They've gone to the other extreme. So couple things, Tyler. First of all, from what you can tell, and maybe you can't, was this the right move to move on from Chancey Stuckey?
I guess I don't. I mean, I don't have that big of an issue with it. I guess my biggest problem is it's not just Chancey Stuckey related. It's like, okay, is Chancey Stuckey really the reason that the offense didn't meet its expectations? I don't think you can separate this discussion of Chancey Stuckey and the wide receivers from the entirety of the offense. I think most of us would agree that the wide receivers were the weakness of the offense. How much of that was that due to Chancey Stuckey's coaching? I don't know that we would all necessarily agree on that answer. So I don't have a huge issue with it. But that's all about what comes in to replace it and how well the next person does. Like if the next guy doesn't recruit at a high level and doesn't get those guys to continue to develop, then I don't. What sort of improvement have you made there? Have you put all your eggs in the Jared Parker basket, so to speak, rather than finding out what else was wrong with the offense beyond just
At
the
least
wide
you didn't
receivers?
call it a Jared Parker Palooza.
What do you think, Eric?
My thought is that Chancey Stuckey's recruiting was part of the solution. So to me, the lack of communication or whatever the issue was that caused, and not all those wide receivers going to the portal were because they were not getting along with Chancey Stuckey. I really think there's three different reasons. And one of them is Rico Flores going in because he was a big fan of Chancey Stuckey. But I, what rose to the level of that made it go beyond recruiting. And I do believe player development has to go hand in hand. But I also think that Marcus Freeman hired Chancey knowing that he had only been a full-time wide receivers coach for 1 year, and that there would be some on-the-job training with that. And then that kind of leads me to believe, was that Jared Parker's fault for not bringing Chancey along, or did he not listen to Jared Parker, or did he not listen to Marcus Freeman? So that's maybe what we haven't gotten to the bottom of at this point. But he did recruit very well, and that was a problem before Chancey Stuckey got here. So we were starting to see an uptick in the quality of wide receiver recruits, and I think that's where it was confusing for me. And then also Marcus doing an about face of initially saying, yeah, we'd love to have everybody roll with us in 2024 on the staff, and then less than 24 hours later, there was a change. And he addressed it somewhat today, in that he said, there were a lot of difficult conversations. We know that he wasn't done with his evaluations. And again, maybe he hadn't talked to the wide receivers themselves at that point. We do know that, again, the three guys that'll be signing later this month, and they're all pretty good prospects, led by Cam Williams of Chicago. They are all pretty excited about Mike Brown, it seems, especially Cam Williams, who talked to our Charleston Bulls, the photogenic one that I told you about that's not on the show for some odd reason. So I still think it's going to be really interesting to kind of get to the bottom of it. I also think it was important for Marcus Freeman to at least touch on this after his about face. Marcus Freeman's brand is, you can trust me, I'm authentic. And then that came off as a real faux pas, and I think needed some explanation. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think the fact that those guys have remained committed, now obviously it's one thing to remain committed, it's another thing to sign. We still got to get through a couple more weeks, still the early signing period, and make sure those kids follow through on what they say they're going to do. But I think that speaks, one, to Chancey Stuckey, who wasn't just selling those kids on Notre Dame or on himself. He was selling them on Notre Dame and what Marcus Freeman and Jared Parker and this whole university and program are doing. And two, I think it speaks to the ability that Marcus Freeman has, or the power that he has in terms of a recruiter. Like, guys are buying into him as well. Maybe, yes, they're buying into Notre Dame, and I think that's a big part of why Notre Dame is having recruiting success. They're finding guys that want to be at Notre Dame, but they also buy in and trust Marcus Freeman that, hey, if he believes Chancey Stuckey wasn't the right guy, he knows better than I do, and I'm going to trust in him that the next guy is going to be fully capable of getting to me to meet my expectations. And so I think it speaks highly to sort of what Notre Dame has going on in the recruiting process. And I think it'll be interesting to see what the next guy in line was able to do in this immediate the recruiting process that follows. Because I think one of the impressive things that Chancey Stuckey has done as a receivers recruiter was that he was selling something that wasn't necessarily apparent in Notre Dame's offense. You know what I mean? It's not like, yes, look at all this success we're having in the passing game on offense.
Right.
that's not like that existed, but that did not prevent him from going out and finding top end receivers to get into the class. Certainly, we're not talking about a collection of 5-star recruits here. We're talking about talented and coveted 4-star recruits, and that is important to continue to get for Notre Dame. So I think at some point, the rubber's going to meet the road there, that Notre Dame's offense is going to need to be able to have some proof of concept to be able to show these receivers that they're recruiting that, hey, it's okay. You've had time to talk about what's going to happen with this offense. Let's see what it is about. And so I think this next recruiting cycle will be very fascinating at the receiver position.
Before we get to some questions, I want to tease a few things out here a little bit. So let's kind of reset here. There are 6 receivers that we believe will be healthy and available to play in the bowl game as of this moment. Who knows what it'll be like in a week from now. Mm-hmm. But there are 6 right now. Only one of them, Matt Salerno, has expiring eligibility. I'm not sure that there's a pure field side starting receiver there. They could put, Matt Salerno over there. They could put KK Smith over there. They could play Jaden Thomas over there if he's healthy. And then there's this transfer portal market, and you've been following that pretty closely here in the past few days. I'm predicting that. What do we know about how the transfer portal market is shaping up for Notre Dame in the wide receiver position?
Yeah, Notre Dame certainly isn't wasting any time in working to replace the wide receivers that it's losing and trying to improve the room. Chris Mitchell of FIU visited Notre Dame this past weekend. He messaged me earlier today, said it was a great visit. He's since posted some photos from the visit. I think Notre Dame's in a very good shape there. He had 64 catches for 1,118 yards and 7 touchdowns at FIU this past season. 6'1", 175 pounds. Had a big game against Arkansas, which was FIU's only Power 5 opponent this season. So looks like a good start there if Notre Dame can close and get him on board. He's the number 52 overall prospect currently in the transfer portal rankings from Rivals, which was just debuted this afternoon with the transfer portal officially opening today. Notre Dame has also been kicking the tires on Bo Collins from Clemson. ESPN's Pete Thamel has reported that he will visit later this week. I have been unable to confirm that yet, but that aligns with what I had been hearing in terms of Notre Dame having interest there. Bo Collins had 38 catches for 510 yards and 3 touchdowns this past season. He's 6'3", 210 pounds. He's number 50 overall in those portal rankings that I mentioned. And he was a guy that Notre Dame recruited out of high school, out of St. John Bosco High School in California, which is the same school where Kingston Villamuasa, Notre Dame's star linebacker commit, who just got a 5th star today, is from that same school. Notre Dame hosted him for an unofficial visit. I remember him camping at Notre Dame as a young recruit, but he ended up at Clemson. He's played all 3 of his seasons there. The thing I haven't been able to totally nail down is what his graduation timeline is, which certainly is important when it comes to transferring to Notre Dame. I believe he was on track to potentially graduate by the end of this academic year, but I'm not sure if he's in a position to transfer between semesters. I don't know that yet, so I'm working to try to track that information down, and we'll keep folks updated on the Insider Lounge with that.
Two questions, and then I think we'll go to questions because I think some of mine are in the viewer questions. One is, do you think Notre Dame can salvage this situation? Do you think they could possibly come out better given what's out in the portal and who's showing initial interest?
Yes, I would say so. I think it's possible. I think we're talking about a lot of moving pieces, right? I mean, so it's hard to know what exactly it's all going to look like. We're talking about a new quarterback for Notre Dame next season with new receivers he's throwing to. So I think in terms of talent, it looks like Notre Dame will be in a position to be potentially as good, if not better, than last year. I think the difference would be is like you don't necessarily have future talent. Like if Notre Dame overcompensates and gets a bunch of grad transfers, I think that's what they need to do at this point. Like that doesn't necessarily mean in 3 years their wide receiver room is going to be great. But
they do have 3 freshmen coming in.
They do, but they've also lost 2 of their incoming, which would be sophomores next year.
But they still have 2 of those.
Right, but those numbers go quick. I mean, look at Notre Dame started the season with 10 receivers, and they're going into the bowl with 6, and 4 of them haven't played. One of them hasn't played all year, or 2 of them haven't played. One of them hasn't played all year, and 2 of them hasn't played since September. So I think you need a lot more numbers at the receiver position. You can't rely on this cycle of bringing in grad transfer receivers, which I don't think is what they want to do, but I think is sort of what they've been forced into given the way the season played out and a coaching change at that position.
Okay.
Did I answer everything you asked there?
Yeah, you did. And what's the right number then? If 10 isn't enough, what's the right number, do you think, as far as scholarship wide receivers? Do you think 11 is the right number, 12?
Yeah, I mean, if you can get to 11 or 12, I think that would be nice. I mean, I think we just saw what can happen if you have 10. I mean, you can get thin quick. Now, if you have 10 and they're all able to help you out, then it's a different story. And then you might have guys that are disgruntled because they didn't get to play enough. So I think it depends on who the 10 are, if your number is going to be 10 versus just numbers on a spreadsheet.
Well, we certainly want gruntled and not disgruntled receivers. The last one from me before we get to the questions. What does Mike Brown bring of what you know of him, and what did Cam Williams have to say about him?
Yeah, Mike Brown is currently the wide receivers coach at Wisconsin. He's just been there for 1 season. He followed Luke Fickell from Cincinnati, where he was the wide receivers coach since 2019. In 2022, he was promoted to passing game coordinator. So some overlap there with Marcus Freeman at Cincinnati, with Gino Guidugli at Cincinnati. I think his Cincinnati resume is the part of the resume that you're most interested in. He developed 3 3-star recruits into NFL draft picks, and top 4 round NFL draft picks too. 2022 second rounder Alec Pierce, 2023 third rounder Trey Tucker, and 2023 fourth rounder Tyler Scott. So some guys that were raw as recruits that developed into NFL talent. So you like what he's done there. He played the position in college at Liberty. He was both a wide receiver and quarterback. So you would think his knowledge of the passing game, giving his titles as passing game coordinator in the past, would be pretty extensive, and I think would be helpful at the position. I don't know him personally. I don't know a ton about him from other than stuff that I've read about him. But I think those are the selling points in terms of what he can do. Wisconsin didn't have a great passing offense this year, and its starting quarterback went down with an injury and missed 3 starts. So that certainly didn't help. Wisconsin's leading receiver, funnily enough, actually followed the Cincinnati staff to Wisconsin. I think Will Pauling is his name off the top of my head. So that's what he had to say there. Cam Williams seemed to be excited, spoke with our Charleston Bulls, as you mentioned, had some familiarity with him, and then has that faith in Marcus Freeman, like I mentioned previously.
Okay, this is a very quick question before we get to the viewer questions. When was the last time you had sugar frosted flakes on your breakfast table? Because they're great.
I don't know the last time I had. I'm not a huge cereal person, but I'm not. I've never been a Frosted Flakes person, unfortunately. So hopefully the Sun Bowl still gives me good access.
They really are great, but they're not good for you, and that's why I haven't had cereal in this house for a lot since I had kids, and I probably shouldn't have had it then. But my grandkids don't eat cereal here. They get fresh cooked breakfast from Grandpa. So, okay, on to the viewer questions. I stalled so you could look through them.
Yeah, I would need longer than that, but I could just let's start with receiver stuff since we've talked about receivers, and then we'll try to move past that. Fred Liskowski asked, "What can you tell us about KK Smith?"
I remember he was committed to Texas Tech, and Notre Dame really liked him. He was a 3-star recruit, and Notre Dame kind of poached him out of Texas Tech. He's got speed. He's a very slightly built guy. We've seen him walking around, not practicing back in August camp, doing all the little exercises that the injured guys do. but speed is supposed to be his premium, and so I'm eager to see. Now, again, he is pretty skinny.
Yeah, and you don't know what sort of development he's been able to have with the shoulder injury this year. I don't know that there's much more that I have to add. I think he covered most of it, but at this point, they need guys that can play, and he will be available for the game, as Marcus Freeman indicated today. What was next I had here? Any chance any of the wide receivers in the portal decide to come back with the new wide receivers coach? Maybe they'll have Tyler, I think that means me, fill in at wide receiver, which would be a horrible, horrible opportunity.
They certainly have that option to do that. I think the fact that, Chris Tyree was in a little bit different situation. Grad transfers are on a different timeline as far as the portal goes. Underclassmen, it opened today, closes on at the end of the day, January 2nd. And all three jumped in. So, I mean, that wasn't a super great sign of, hey, well, maybe I'm taking this too fast. Now, again, that doesn't mean they can't consider Notre Dame. Well, I didn't get the impression Tobias was thinking about it. And I would really be surprised, again, given Rico Flores' disappointment about Chancey not being around. I think one of the reasons Cam Williams, and maybe some of the other recruits, but especially Cam Williams, knew Mike Brown from visiting up at Wisconsin. So there was a relationship there, but I just don't see it happening, even though conceivably it could.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I don't know that it will happen. I think there was a lot of effort in trying to get them to stay before they entered the portal, and I'm not sure that a specific coach was going to sway them from seeing what else is out there and potentially pursuing that. I think once you get into this process and you get all these pitches from all these other schools, I think it's really hard to turn around unless it's like crickets, unless you like say, well, I thought I'd get a lot better offers than I am right now. Then I think that your potential of returning is higher, but I don't know that that's going to be the case for Notre Dame's wide receivers. They've all been pretty highly ranked in our transfer portal rankings from Rivals so far. All right. Sorry, I'm normally much quicker with these, but you guys did these all while I was talking. Here we go. Steve Wank says Coach wouldn't commit to Sam playing in El Paso. What are your thoughts?
Well, he wouldn't commit to answering my question. I don't know if he was being, I thought, well, he didn't answer it, so maybe he's one of the guys that isn't going. And I thought, well, maybe he's really coy and he just doesn't want to answer it either way. I thought maybe that one I could sneak that one in and he would be nice, but no, that wasn't happening. I mean, Sam had said that he was, given that it's not the ReliaQuest Bowl against LSU. I mean, Oregon State, their defense, I'd say almost all, if not their entire defense, is going to play in this game. The pieces that they are missing are on the offensive side of the ball, the ones so far. And they played, I mean, they were a decent defense. They were in the upper third in total defense. They were about middle of the pack in pass efficiency defense. And they played against some really good quarterbacks, two of whom will probably be Heisman finalists, and Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. They had to face Cam Ward of Washington State, Noah Fafita from Arizona. They did not face Cam Williams. That was one of the Pac-12 teams that they did not play. My guess is, since he didn't say, oh, yeah, Sam's playing, I'm guessing that he's not, but that's just a pure guess.
Yeah, I think certainly if he would have answered your question, it could have opened him up for like us asking about more specific players. And it seemed like he was pretty adamant about not wanting to do that.
I should have asked the Hartman question first.
But given that the way that he had talked about Sam Hartman before, I thought there would be a chance that he would say that he was playing if he was playing. So it doesn't sound positive from my perspective. But like I don't have any insight necessarily. Notre Dame's practiced twice. I have not heard whether or not Sam Hartman was or wasn't practicing. So we will have to see what gets announced this week. All right. Great story. Ron Roberts says, great story about Joey Tanona. What do you think his chances to actually play? I assume for the Irish.
Well, thank you. I don't think he's going to play for Notre Dame. I mean, he is in the portal. The reason why I don't think he plays for Notre Dame, and I went through this with David Adams back in the spring/summer of 2021. David Adams was a linebacker from Pittsburgh, came to Notre Dame, just was about falling apart physically when he got here. And by the spring of his freshman year, Brian Kelly goes, David, you're a wonderful football player, but your body isn't the same as it was when you were a junior in high school and healthy. We'd love for you to stay on here at Notre Dame, get your degree, which he did. But in talking with David about the process, you can undo medical hardships, but according to David, it's much harder at the school that you're at than if you transfer, because the NCAA will double down on all kinds of red tape if you're staying to make sure that you're not stashing guys as medical hardships so that their scholarship doesn't count against the 85 minimum, that you're not abusing the rule. If you're transferring to another school, they're much more lenient about that. And that's why I think Joey Tanona will go somewhere else. I don't know that they accounted for him in their math. I mean, he was a bright prospect as an interior lineman. I don't know that there's a great opportunity for him to play anytime soon here. But my sense is that he's going to start his journey somewhere else.
Yeah, and I would look at Purdue as a potential option there, staying in state. He's an in-state kid. So that's where I would predict Joey Tanona to end up. But I don't know that a lot of people necessarily were anticipating him coming available as a prospect either. And I'm sure folks will want to check in and see how he's doing and look into it some more in the next few days.
Just real quick, for those that didn't see the story, he had a head injury as an early enrollee. I mean, he had been on Notre Dame campus for a month, was being driven to an early morning workout, and a car hit the car he was riding in, and he had a head injury. And it was a long road back, but he's ready to take on football again.
Yeah, and it was a significant injury. It wasn't just like your run-of-the-mill concussion. It was something that was bad enough to force him to medically retire from football at that point. All right, next question is from Jay Golden 44. What's the odds Audric Estime plays?
I would say very slim. I think he will get ready for the NFL. Again, I think a higher profile game might have tugged at him a little bit more. And I'm talking a New Year's Six or a playoff game. I don't know. And I'm not disparaging the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl at all. And this is why. First of all, they sold out in one day. Those people in El Paso love Notre Dame, and it's not everywhere does everybody love you. In El Paso, they love Notre Dame. And they have, I mean, the ACC is sending 11 teams to bowls. 3 of them have 2 ranked teams in them, and one of those is Florida State, Georgia, and this is another one of them, and NC State and Kansas State's the other. So this is a decent game, but not high profile enough for Audric Estime, in my opinion, to risk it.
Yeah, I would say slim as well. He is on the short list of guys I have notifications on, just waiting for them to announce that they're not playing in the bowl game. And funny enough, he posted on Instagram today an ad promoting, I think it was CVS. If it was Walgreens, that's probably not good to confuse the two. But it's just kind of funny. It's like, that's probably not a bad time to have a guy push out an NIL ad when everyone's waiting with bated breath to find out what he's going to do. Because I don't know that I would have seen it otherwise, but I had my notifications on and I saw it. So I thought that was kind of funny. All right. More questions. Bob Alvey asked, curious how you think Georgia and Bama's offenses performed this weekend. It was the first top 25 defense Georgia faced this season, and second for Bama. For perspective, ND faced 4 in the top 25 with 2 being in the top 7.
I did not watch the game. I did not have an opportunity to watch the game because I had another commitment at the time. Tyler, do you want to comment? I mean, I've seen the numbers.
No.
I give Bama a lot of credit for scoring 27 points. It seemed like they were in control that whole game, and kudos to them. But I didn't get a chance to watch it. And again, watching it a lot of times gives you some pretty good insights. For example, I watched the Florida State game and learned a lot about Florida State and why I thought they deserved to be in the top 4.
Yeah, I saw very little of the games on Saturday because I was working and neck deep in transfer portal stuff, so I didn't see much of the games. The game I watched the most was Washington, Oregon on Friday night, in part due to being a Heisman voter, which leads me to my next question. Jeffrey Steven asked, to both of you, who are your picks for the Heisman? Who will and who should win? Who will be invited to New York? Unfortunately, Eric and I are both Heisman voters. I know Eric voted. He mentioned it. He almost forgot to do it, so he mentioned that. I did too.
Well, I was trying to wait until all the games were over, and then you have a very small window.
Yeah, no, I woke up this morning and did it, so I totally get that. I was waiting as well. But just with the events of covering Notre Dame in the last 48 hours, there's a lot going on. So we can't share with you how we voted or who we think would vote, because I think that would be sort of misleading. But we can share with you.
They make us sign a thing that we won't share it before the vote.
Correct. Yeah, that's why I was saying that. But they did announce the finalists, so we can tell Jeffrey Stevens. I don't know if you saw that, but I can share that. The finalists are Bo Nix from Oregon, Michael Penix from Washington, wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. from Ohio State, and Jaden Daniels, the quarterback from LSU. There are 4 finalists for the Heisman Trophy this year. So those 4 guys will all be in New York.
And what I can say is I think they picked great finalists.
Yeah. I'm in agreement there. All right. Another one from Jeffrey Stevens. What will Notre Dame do for place kicker in 2024?
Portal.
Yep. Go back to the portal again. I couldn't tell you who, but that will be the source of Notre Dame's next kicker, barring an upset. Anthony Campbell asks, will Steve Angeli and Kenny Minchie stick around if they keep going to the transfer portal?
I'll tell you what, Anthony. I mean, if you saw who the quarterbacks in the portal are today, you can't answer that question with any confidence because, I mean, like Kyle McCord, Ohio State starter, is in the portal. I mean, this is a young guy with a lot of football ahead of him that played on a team that had 1 loss that barely missed the playoff, and he's in the portal. So my best guess, and again, I think this is the last time Notre Dame goes to the portal for a starter for the foreseeable future. But again, we don't know how everything's going to play out behind it. I think at least Kenny Minchie stays, and CJ Carr, obviously. And then I think Angeli considers whether he could start somewhere else and whether he's got a chance to compete to be the starter either in 2024 or 2025. I think that's what he'll assess.
All right. I'm going to ask you the next question because I'm working on some breaking news here. Brendan McCarthy asked, any reaction to FSU being left out after corrupt 1993 national title and ACC champion? Player safety in lieu of an expanded playoff, a cause for celebration for me. Thoughts?
Brendan, I wish I understood the question better. I know Tyler's got to work, so I will translate this myself. So my reaction to Florida State being left out was I thought they were deserving of being in, even with the injury to their starting quarterback. I don't think we knew enough about Tay Rodemaker to make that decision. We didn't see him play in the Louisville game, but I'm telling you, their defense is for real. And Braden Fisk, who Notre Dame tried to get to come as a transfer defensive tackle, my goodness, that guy can play football. I mean, he was an animal. Their whole defensive line was incredible. And Rodemaker did win a game on the road against an SEC team in Florida. Florida State, I mean, the ACC wasn't a good conference, but they played most of the good teams in the conference, including Clemson, beat them on the road. They played 2 SEC teams. They boat raced LSU. Now, who should not get in? My sense is Alabama right now is playing as well as anybody in the country. So that's a tough decision. Texas beat them head to head. I still think Florida State deserved to get in. I think you need to account for what happened on the field. And Alabama lost to Texas, and I think Alabama should not have gotten in, even though they would be favored in Vegas over maybe everybody but Michigan, the team that they're playing next.
All right. Here, Michael Donahue says the news better be good, Tyler. It is good news. Notre Dame has received a transfer portal commitment from Arizona State nickelback Jordan Clark, who visited over the weekend. Charleston Poles is working on writing up that story for us now. I wrote about Jordan Clark over the weekend. He's the son of former NFL player Ryan Clark, also an NFL analyst for ESPN, and host of, I think the podcast is called The Pivot. And Marcus Freeman was actually a guest on that podcast this past year, so that's kind of interesting. But more interesting for football sakes, Clark led Arizona State in pass breakups this season with 9 during the regular season. He started 10 games at nickelback and played in 11. He had 50 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss. He's a 5'10", 185-pound player. He's eligible for one more season. He redshirted in 2019 and played in 2020, which allows him to do that. And I'm going to ask for Eric's reaction while I look up what his transfer portal ranking is in our Rivals ranking system.
I think that's really encouraging that Notre Dame was able to turn that around that quickly. And we saw the impact Thomas Harper was able to have as a one-and-done nickel prospect. I'm not sure that Clarence Lewis is going to be back at Notre Dame. He was academically a senior this year, so he could go somewhere and play a 5th year because he does have the COVID exemption. He was in the last class to have the COVID exemption, but he has not redshirted previously, so it would be his last year. But there really wasn't somebody that was projecting as a nickel that had any experience. I think you could put Micah Bell there, and eventually he'll be pretty good there. He's a freshman, was a spreader down in Texas. But I don't know that you feel good about putting essentially a redshirt freshman with very little playing experience when the stakes are this high. I love this move. I think that this was really good for Notre Dame to be this aggressive in getting a nickel.
Yeah, so Jordan Clark is number 88 overall of the defensive backs that Rivals has ranked. Number 88 overall in terms of the portal prospects that Notre Dame or Rivals has ranked. Sorry, I'm doing too many things at once to speak clearly here. And I'm pulling up where he ranked among defensive backs. He was right ahead of Ramon Henderson, obviously Notre Dame's
senior safety, and that's a good sign.
Who entered the portal. So sort of subbing out Ramon Henderson for Jordan Clark. I think Ramon Henderson would have been a potential leading candidate to be a nickel if he stayed at Notre Dame. He played some as like a 5th or 6th defensive back for Notre Dame a lot this past season. So Jordan
what's Clark's size?
He is, oh man, I click into many things. 5'10", 185.
Okay. So that's a smaller guy than Harper a little bit. Harper was around 200, wasn't he?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure Harper's size. He played with physicality. I think
he really did.
One thing that struck me when you said Micah Bell as a potential nickel, he has the speed, but I don't know if he has the physicality that's required with the way that
Notre Dame likes physicality at its nickel. Some people just want the speed, somebody that can stay with the slot
I think you
receiver.
Have to when it's your base.
You have to have
defense
both.
because you're playing.
Teams will gash you in the run if you don't.
Right, correct, exactly. So that's important to have. Notre Dame feels like Jordan Clark can do that, and so they've quickly pulled him in. I was just looking on social media. People were like talking about tampering and stuff, but he's a grad transfer, so he was allowed. He entered the portal last week. He visited this weekend as allowed, and he made the decision to come to Notre Dame. So there's no tampering required for the grad transfers because they've already been allowed to sort of go through with the process. It wasn't like he was just allowed to start going through this process today.
Before we get to some more questions, I want us to get to the Sun Bowl selection process a little bit. So I'm going to blather on here a little bit while you can get a couple things done maybe. So Notre Dame, once they're not in a New Year's Six Bowl, they fall into the ACC Bowl agreement. And it's a little bit difficult to understand. The Orange Bowl is tricky. They don't replace the ACC team. Potentially, they would face an ACC team. They weren't anywhere ranked high enough to get close to that. And then you get into the next tier, and there's a single tier with the ReliaQuest Bowl. And it has contingencies based on the Orange Bowl, strangely enough. But I will simplify this. Alabama winning rerouted Notre Dame out of the ReliaQuest Bowl. Not that Alabama ended up there, but a Big Ten team, instead of ACC or Notre Dame, had to play against LSU in the ReliaQuest Bowl January 1st in Tampa, Florida. So a Big Ten team, I believe it's Wisconsin, will play them. And so Notre Dame was no longer considered for that. Then the ACC is very deceptive in how they do this on their website. They have what they call Tier 1 bowls, but there are actually tiers to these 9 Tier 1 bowls that are affiliated. ACC sent 11 teams, so you had to place 11 teams. So once you got past Florida State being in the Orange Bowl, then they were looking to place the other teams and Notre Dame. And the Pop-Tarts Bowl, and that just sounds so funny, the Gator Bowl and the Holiday Bowl, they were the first 3 up to select. And there were some conflicting reports about this, and I want to get to the bottom of this. So the Pop-Tarts Bowl, Gator Bowl, and Holiday Bowl all had a chance, theoretically, to select Notre Dame. The Holiday Bowl already had picked USC, so that wasn't a great destination for Notre Dame. The Gator Bowl just had Notre Dame last year with South Carolina. But a source told me the Pop-Tarts Bowl already was setting up a press conference with Marcus Freeman, having felt like they would be allowed to pick Notre Dame and were going to pick Notre Dame. Then there was this big delay, and the ACC told them, you can't pick Notre Dame. So NC State ends up playing Kansas State in Orlando on December 28th in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which Notre Dame has played in a couple other times under different names. So then what happened is they fell into the next tier. They, Miami, and North Carolina were in the next tier of bowls, which were the Sun, the Pinstripe, and the Duke's Mayo Bowl. And his Sun Bowl was shocked that Notre Dame was available. And they're like, well, how do we decide who gets to pick first? So they put the names of the bowls in a hat. The Sun Bowl got thrown out first. They couldn't say Notre Dame fast enough. And again, the bowl sold out within 1 hour. Miami went to the Pinstripe to face Rutgers. North Carolina went to the Duke's Mayo Bowl to face West Virginia. I think Notre Dame got the best bowl out of those 3. What isn't clear was why Notre Dame wasn't allowed to go to that top tier, but it was an ACC decision. Those bowls didn't pass on Notre Dame, even though that's been alluded in other stories. They wouldn't, and they didn't pass on Notre Dame. What I can tell you also about this game is Oregon State's top 2 quarterbacks are in the portal. DJ Uiagalelei, who played against Notre Dame at Clemson twice. He was Oregon State starter this year. He's in the portal as a grad transfer. Aiden Childs, who's a super freshman, played very well in the 7 games that he relieved or tag team DJ. He is probably on his way to Michigan State. He jumped in the portal today. Now, their third stringer, Ben Gobranson, he's not your typical third stringer. He was 7-1 as an emergency starter last season. He was the Las Vegas Bowl MVP. Pretty good stats, threw for, I believe, 14 touchdowns, ran for 5 more in those 8 starts last year. So he'll be the starter now. If he gets hurt in the game, they're in trouble. They have 2 redshirt freshmen that have never played and probably aren't on their radar. And in fact, the interim head coach, Keefence Hansen, today wasn't sure which one of them was even number 2. He goes, well, we're going to have to give them reps in practice to figure that out. So, Tyler, do we want to?
You have my full attention. You have my full attention now. I'm back in the mix.
Okay. Do you want to comment on the bowl matchup, or do you want to go to questions at this point?
I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, it's not a headline thing. I mean, the number next to the names makes it sound maybe more appealing than it is, even though I think some people were bummed by the Sun Bowl placement, but people were also making fun of the Pop-Tarts Bowl when I think that would have been a perfectly good place for Notre Dame to end up playing as well.
With an edible mascot. Do you think Notre Dame it will be tested more by Oregon State or Kansas State, who they would have played in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, without their starting quarterback? Will Howard is in the portal. Their starting quarterback will be freshman Avery Johnson, who Notre Dame tried to recruit a couple times in earnest at the beginning, then kind of cooled on him. Then when Dante Moore wasn't coming, hey, Avery, how you doing? And then they ended up with Kenny Minchie.
I do think Kansas State would be more of a challenge. I think I saw a comment today that most of their guys are expected to play in the game. They're not expected to miss a lot of guys, other than obviously your starting quarterback is important. But I think that Kansas State would have maybe been a tougher matchup for Notre Dame. But Oregon State's interesting just from the recent or distant, depending on how you look at it, what your time frame is, history with Notre Dame as an opponent. So I think there's just a lot more changeover, feels like, at Oregon State, especially with the head coach,
with the coaching staff, with Jonathan Smith going to Michigan State. They're cobbling together an assistant coaching staff. They have their next head coach, but he's not going to coach in the game. He's working on putting the staff together, recruiting. They have an interim coach that was their receivers coach. The Kansas State thing is interesting because they would have faced the offensive coordinator, one of the offensive coordinators that turned them down. The other thing that's interesting about both those teams, they have 4 losses, and 3 of those losses were pretty impressive. They're very close losses to good teams. One of Kansas State's losses was to Texas in overtime, which would have knocked Texas out of the playoff. And Oregon State lost to Washington by 2 points. They lost to Arizona by 3. They lost to Washington State by a couple points. Then Oregon pounded them in their rivalry game. Mm-hmm. And Kansas State had some narrow losses. I think they had a narrow loss to Missouri as well. And they had a bad loss in their last game to Iowa State at home. The 3 road losses that were close. So I think either of those would have been pretty good bowl matchups for Notre Dame.
All right. We can go back to questions. I do think we should probably talk a little bit about Riley Leonard, because I don't know we've talked much about him at all other than referenced him. But let's go to some
He's
questions.
On the agenda.
Yeah, but it's 7:56 as well. Jeffrey Stevens asked last week, Marty Biaggi traveled to Hawaii to recruit. So who are we recruiting in Hawaii? Did any coach do or will do a stop in with KVA ahead of signing day? I will answer that. Josiah Kia, the younger brother of Kahanu Kia, who signed and enrolled at Notre Dame and has been on a mission trip, is someone that Notre Dame is recruiting out of Hawaii. So that's one of the people that Notre Dame continues to check in on there. I think it's important for Notre Dame to have a continued presence out there, because the state has been fairly good to it since the Manti Te'o days. As for Kingston Viliamuasa, yes, I expect Notre Dame to be out there at some point. I don't know that I know exactly when that will be, but yes, Notre Dame will certainly make time to get out and see him, they'll do that with all the commits. That's not specific just to KVA. They want to make sure that they get out to see all the guys, and they can celebrate his new 5-star rating from Rivals.
And he's in California, not Hawaii.
That is correct. Bob Alvey, recently a timeline was discussed about the hire of a strength and conditioning coach. I get that their presence wouldn't be felt until next semester, but how important is it to those deciding to stay or go pro?
I don't know that it's important to them, but Marcus has made it important. He said, despite everything that's on his plate, that's on the front burner, and he expects the announcement to be sooner than later. They are interviewing people.
All right. Jim Morrissey, any sense as to the instinct of Father Dowd, new Notre Dame president, announced today as to whether he is pro or con on giving the football program all it needs to win a natty quickly?
I have no instincts on that. I would rather ask him that directly.
Yeah, I don't know much about him, to be frank, other than learning today that he was born in Michigan City, Indiana, which is the same county that I grew up in. So I thought that was interesting. But
in the same county both my sons were born in.
Exactly. So that's the interesting fact. We'll certainly be looking into that and do some more reporting eventually down the road to get to know him. And certainly Pete Pavakwa is someone we have to get to know a bit better here soon, as well as the new athletic director. All right, Patrick McCarthy. Hi, men. Cat's Deli on me before Army game at Yankee Stadium. What is your favorite food city for opponents?
Go first. I'm just taking in that he's giving us free food. I need to clear my mind. I'm excited.
I might steal your answer because the overall number one food item that I have had on a road trip was the cheesesteak from D'Alessandro's that Eric and I both had together when we arrived in Philadelphia at the recommendation of Mike McGlinchey. It was a long drive to Philadelphia, an eventful one with some news going on. But to sit down, I think I remember Eric saying he nearly wept, and I wasn't looking close enough to see.
It wasn't nearly. It actually happened.
I wasn't looking closely enough to see if a tear rolled down his cheek, but it was pretty phenomenal. The way I explain it to people is that yes, there's been some great barbecue I've had on the road, but I've had good barbecue in a lot of different places. But I've never had a cheesesteak, which I think everyone's had a cheesesteak, but nothing like it's ridiculous how much better that cheesesteak was than every other cheesesteak I've ever had. So that's why I think Philadelphia has got to be at the top of my list. Now, maybe it'd probably be better to answer with somewhere that has all kinds of different options, but that was the food item at the top of the list for me.
Yeah, my mom is an incredible cook, and my grandma came from Italy and was ridiculous. She'd always go, go on it. You'd say, Grandma, I can't eat anymore. I'll go on a diet tomorrow.
All right. Beef Eater 9 ND08. Herb Brooks said all-star teams failed versus the Russians because they play as individuals, not as teams. I think the portal has this effect on portal-heavy teams, aka USC, play like this. Your thoughts?
I don't know that we have a large enough sample size yet, but you could make that case with Colorado that they brought in all that talent. Everybody was pretty excited. And then they went, I believe, 4-8. Mm-hmm. But I would say when you look at most of the teams toward the top of college football, they want to use the portal to fill holes, not to build foundations.
Right.
And I think that's a smart. So I'd say Herb Brooks was right in this sense. And I think that's what Notre Dame will continue to do. I think Clemson has taken it to the other extreme, and maybe they'll change. But they've said no to the portal, and to their peril. I mean, it's hurt their program.
Yeah, I do think it is a way to potentially set a foundation for these new coaches. Like Deion Sanders, he wasn't inheriting a good team at Colorado. So even though 4-8 is certainly different than with the way people thought it might go, by the way it started the season by surprise, it's still better than what Colorado was. Now, certainly there's still plenty of work to be done, but it can give you that jolt, give you a foundation to build off of that maybe is better than the one that you're inheriting. So I do think there is some value there to new head coaches that maybe are inheriting a program that lacks talent. But I do think that it's not the best way to sort of build a foundation for the long term if you're not able to recruit at a high level.
Speaking of portal guys, Tom Lemming, longtime recruiting analyst, just texted me, and it says, I gave Jordan Clark 4 stars when he came out of University High School in Baton Rouge. I really liked him. I make an annual visit to that school because it's so productive. Jordan Osbury's from that school, Notre Dame's freshman linebacker. On Clark, he said hard hitter, maybe about 5'9" when I saw him. Very productive in high school.
All right. We are not Marshall. Was the staff not able to sell the vision of the quarterback position to Tyler Buckner? With Notre Dame pursuing Riley Leonard, they are very similar players. Now Buckner is exploring lacrosse. Tough news.
Well, I mean, it was funny because I talked to Buckner before he started against Ohio State, and he said, I've been in that stadium before. I was going to be a lacrosse player, and he went on a recruiting visit to Ohio State for lacrosse. So let's talk about Riley Leonard here. Tyler, the Duke quarterback, he will have 1 year of eligibility left. He does not have a redshirt year, so this is a COVID year for him. What's your sense about Riley Leonard ending up at Notre Dame?
Yeah, I do think that's what my prediction would be. I think there's too much pointing in that direction to think differently at this point. I think Auburn is a potential threat, but I don't think it's a big enough one. Notre Dame has gone about this seemingly in a similar way to how it operated in finding Sam Hartman through the transfer portal, and that it was something that was discussed behind closed doors, and then sort of the process needed to play out to follow along with that. So I think we're waiting to see if and when Riley Leonard announces a commitment to Notre Dame. I think that's the way things are trending. I think Notre Dame would need to come up with another plan if it doesn't go that way. So I think this is what Notre Dame hopes for and expects to happen, and we'll see how it plays out. What do you think of Riley Leonard as a player?
When you look at his statistics, you go, is he overrated? Even his really good 2022 statistics, and then you watch him play and you go, oh, I see why he's good.
Right.
Because he can toggle between being a passer and being a runner. He's got that it factor. You just have faith when the ball's in his hands and he's running the offense and that he's going to come up with big plays. I really like him. I'm a fan. I was not confident Notre Dame could get him through admissions and that he didn't yet have his degree. He will soon, but he doesn't yet have his degree. And so I like him. And I think, he'll have to compete, but I think this is the way Notre Dame should go. I know that's not the popular thing. People are maybe a little heartbroken that things didn't have more of a storybook ending with Sam Hartman. But I mean, look at the guys that are going to New York. All three of those guys are portal guys. All three of the quarterbacks were portal guys.
So circling back to We Are Not Marshall's question about Tyler Buckner, I think Tyler Buckner was sold on what he could potentially do at Alabama, and I think that's what lured him away from Notre Dame. And his tie was to Tommy Rees. Tommy Rees recruited him at a young age, and he felt like, hey, let me follow Tommy Rees to Alabama and give it a shot. It clearly did not work out, and now he's looking into his options as a potential lacrosse player. So not the way anyone who followed Tyler Buckner as a high school recruit would have projected this to work out, but certainly a fascinating story that I think we'll continue to monitor and watch from afar as he goes through this lacrosse process.
He could go back to football eventually. I don't think he could have transferred as a football to football transfer without sitting out a year, because this would have been his second transfer and he didn't have his degree. So maybe there's something going on. Maybe there's something I'm just creating.
All right. I think that's everything, Eric.
Okay. Real quick. You mentioned earlier in the show, Kingston Viliamo Asa got 5-star status today from Rivals. Their new top 250 is coming out. Is it tomorrow?
Yes, correct. Tuesday.
And then Ivan Taylor, a safety, committed way back earlier last week, but I don't want that to get too lost in the shuffle because that's an awfully good pickup for Notre Dame, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it was actually Friday. So earlier last week is actually later last week. It just seems so long ago.
I had dental surgery Friday, and it feels like a month ago now.
He's 5'11", 170 pounds, out of West Orange Winter Garden High School in Florida, same high school that produced Dexter Williams. He's the number 14 safety in the 2025 class, number 134 overall. He's the son of former Pittsburgh Steeler Ike Taylor, defensive back in the NFL level. His offer list is impressive: Alabama, Florida, FSU, Miami, Michigan, USC. He's the 10th commitment in Notre Dame's 2025 class and the 6th four-star from that group. So an important addition there, and Notre Dame keeps rolling with recruiting despite everyone that follows Notre Dame, or not everyone, many people that follow Notre Dame thinking that everything is going to ruins. But the recruiting seems to keep picking up, and people still seem to be buying into what Marcus Freeman and this program have to offer.
Okay, I want to thank Legacy Heating and Air at the very bottom of the screen. They were actually here today. I'm on this maintenance plan. They come 3 times a year, clean everything. It's awesome. Also, use code NDYT for a 30-day free trial of Inside ND Sports. Lots of great free stuff, but the stuff behind the paywall is awesome, and I think worth a look. And then at the end of the 30 days, you can jump through the transfer portal and join us. That's all I got, Tyler.
Yeah, we had a big audience tonight. Thanks for everyone for tuning in live. We'll be back next week with Football Never Sleeps again. We're planning to record our Inside Indie Sports podcast on Tuesday. That will probably be our schedule as we can make it work moving forward this month, leading into the Sun Bowl. And like Eric said, go over to InsideNDSports.com, check us out, subscribe to us there, and also make sure you like, comment, and subscribe on this video to keep growing our YouTube audience. Have a good week.